Education, October 3rd, 2017 at 7 o'clock p.m. Kathy, could you please call the roll? It's in front of me.
Gabar.
Present.
Blakely.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Gaspar.
Here.
Locke.
Here.
Lowe.
Present.
Dremel.
Here. Mrs. Locke, could you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Dr. Hastings, are there any items to be removed or added to the agenda tonight?
There are not.
All right, and do we have anyone wishing to address the board? It is all employees, so there's no public speaking, it doesn't look like. And we'd like to acknowledge that the BEA is here in force tonight to visit with us, but that Amy is out of town, and so no prepared remarks were prepared. No remarks were prepared. All right, and then we will jump right to our student ambassadors, and you are our first performer tonight.
All right, so it's the best week of the year at high school right now, which is homecoming week, and the theme is dancing through the decades. So the seniors are the 80s, juniors are 70s, sophomores are 60s, and freshmen are 50s. So far this week we've done the class Olympics was last night. The juniors, we dominated, we made it happen. But tomorrow, yeah, that's the parade. So everybody prepared their floats last weekend, and we're excited to do that. The class t-shirt day is tomorrow, and I think the sophomores just sold out most of their shirts, so I'm sure they're raising a ton of money on that. And then Paint the Town was last Sunday as well, and it looks great as if you've driven through there. Other than that, just like a big shout out to all student council members, because it was a lot of work, and I think it's going pretty smoothly so far. So.
And then we also have a couple of good lucks. Good luck to the girls golf team at regional, and then good luck to our football team, of course. They're undefeated and they're playing on Friday. And then also just an update on Link Crew. Before the last meeting, we actually met with our crews, and so we talked to them about homecoming and traditions and kind of gave them a little insight about how it works at Batavia. And so we thought that went really well.
Awesome. Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Homecoming week. All right. Next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. Streamlined way to approve our recurring business items. So all of the details are in the board report. So if Mr. Pierce could take us through the consent agenda.
Yeah, I believe there's a typo in 4.2. It's 4.1 and 4.2 are the approval of the special and regular meeting minutes from September 19th. 4.3 is the personnel report. 4.4 is we had one donation. Chip-in donated $800 for continued SEL supports at Bertolo. 4.5 is the overnight field trip approval. The BHS marching band is going to go down to St. Louis. And 4.6 is the authorization to begin development of the FY19 budget. And we always conclude with 4.7, the approval for the consent agenda.
All right. Anyone have any questions or clarifications on the consent agenda tonight?
Just for point of clarification for me, is this standard, like, this trip is happening, I mean, we had a couple last week, but this trip is happening like in 2 weeks for the marching band? Is that standard that they ask for approval 2 weeks ahead of time?
So they did ask for this last month, and then I sent it back to correct something because there was an error on it. But I did get feedback from another board member that talked about maybe getting these as soon as possible. I think sometimes they wait till they have all of the details because part of the procedure says that share your itinerary. So I think sometimes they wait to make sure they have everything to share. But we'll talk to them about a better balance and maybe get a little sooner.
Because it would be really unfortunate, like, if we decided not to approve the consent agenda because of this item, and then they're 2 weeks out from this planned trip.
Right.
Okay.
I'll give them that feedback.
Any other questions, clarifications? All right, then I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So
Second.
Moved by Locke, second by Lowe. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Gabar.
Slow yes.
Blakely.
yes.
Dremel.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Gaspar.
Yes.
Locke.
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
And one quick correction, Kathy, I don't know if you noticed that it showed that the second was by, okay.
I did not see that until this minute.
Okay, I figured you like had a lot going on and I just thought we'd correct it now. rather
No,
than-
thank you.
All right, the only items on our agenda tonight for action are the policy and facilities. So I will hand it over to Dr. Hankins.
Sure, these are agenda items that you saw last month as well. The policy report, we'll talk about it in 3 different parts. The first part are second reading policies. And before we vote on those, I do know that John wants to talk about, he wasn't here for the first reading, and he wanted to talk about 6080.
Can I make a motion that we pull 6080 out temporarily and vote on the others and then come back to it rather than?
You don't even have to make a motion, you can just request it, yeah?
Can we do
can-
that?
We can vote on that separately.
I'm happy to speak about that then after we finish that business.
Okay, so let's talk then about 6187, 275, and 8070. At the last month, you guys didn't have any feedback. These are all press updates. So any other questions on those 3?
I wasn't here last meeting, and I apologize for that. Orders to forego life-sustaining treatment, maybe I missed some relatively interesting discussion on that.
No.
I'm not at all sure what this is about, frankly.
We're required by law to have a policy that relates to this, and I'm not aware of any that are enacted, but a team would need to be called if a parent is requesting that, basically a DNR for a student. And we would pull together a team, notify the relevant staff that this child has that order on file.
It's just to make sure that we honor it if it is our
Correct.
fault, correct?
Assuming that the child under our care at the time was severely injured, and this is a pre-authorization for the school district to...
It's not usually about injury, but about other chronic illnesses.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, then I would entertain a motion to adopt policy 6180, 7275, and 8070 as presented, removing 6080 for the moment from the vote.
So moved.
6120 is not on my list. Hold on. Oh, because that's an exhibit, yeah. Good question.
That's what I was looking at, sorry.
We're just in part 1 minus 6080.
Correct.
I moved it and Sue seconded.
I'm sorry, it was so small.
I was
Bo
told-
moved,
I
Locke,
got confused.
second.
Christensen?
Yep.
I can yell it if you want.
All right.
I am most hard of hearing in this year, so
I'm
yes.
actually most hard of hearing in this year.
What?
I got both ears, so.
Brady Barr?
Yes.
Blakely?
Yes.
Drummel?
Yes.
Dryden?
Yes.
Gaspar?
Yes.
Locke?
Yes.
And Lowe?
Yes.
And Tina did have that question about 6120, that's part 2. The board doesn't act on exhibits and administrative procedures, but we like to show you what we're adding to your policy. So there is a procedure of the letter that we give students regarding their 504 rights. And so that, we've never included that, we're throwing that in your policy. So
Never
there-
included that.
We always gave the letter, but it wasn't part of your policy. And so there were some updates to the actual letter that Lisa Palisi did incorporate into our letter based on the press recommendation.
So it's just the new letter.
Yes. So we always gave it, we just never had it in policy. Now it makes it so that anybody can find it on the website, not just for people at the meeting who are receiving a copy of it. So that was part 2. So let's go back to 6080, the teaching of controversial issues.
Yeah, Jen, you took the time to share your thoughts with me, which I appreciate. So would you like to share what you're thinking with the rest of the board?
Right, okay. I handed everyone a statement that I had written up last night. I'm not going to read it in its entirety, I'm just going to submit it for the record. There are copies there for the public at BATV or if there's one. So I have a couple of issues with this as written. The third bullet point, where we ask for teaching about controversial issues, where it says informative and present a balanced view. While I understand why that language is there, from my social studies background and 22 years teaching social studies, I'm here to tell you that at least in certain subjects like social studies, I imagine in other humanities, maybe literature, other things, but definitely in social studies, particularly when it comes to history, there's very little that isn't controversial, and there are many, 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 many things that one simply can't have a balanced view on. Like, oh, say the Holocaust, or say slavery, or say racism, or say torture. Some things will appear as we go through time in current events, and other things are just historically, I should think, the weight of historians have said, this particular thing does not fit the social and moral norms of any civilized society. So I'm going to suggest, before I move on, that we add 2 words. I guess I'm proposing a motion or an amendment here. What am I doing?
Yeah, you can, why don't you tell everybody what you're thinking?
What I would like to do is add 2 words next to that bullet point, informative and present a balanced view. I'd like to strike the period and add when appropriate. Period.
Okay.
So I think the board, there have been times when we've made a change and people still felt comfortable voting on it if the change isn't substantive. But if people need time, we can bring it back for a 3rd reading. So I guess that's the choice right now.
Right. Was that your only change to this
That was
policy?
my
Your only
change to the
concern?
language, then I have other concerns.
I actually have a couple as well. Now that, over the past couple of weeks, I think this comes into some definite grayness.
Okay.
I have some problem with the word ensure that's actually just in. I understand the intent of a policy like this, but first of all, the definition of controversial, which is problematic, and then ensure, we'll pick you for instance, as a superintendent, how can you guarantee that those controversial subjects that allow the school-sponsored presentations, how can you guarantee that they will not be controversial in nature? Because ensure means guarantee.
So we
no, I
can't
thought
teach
you were ensuring the
controversial,
bullets, aren't you?
but we're ensuring
yeah,
that it's
but-
age appropriate, those things.
Right, but one parent's view on age appropriate versus another parent's view on age appropriate. Each one of these bullets has incredible amount of vagueness. And I think to adopt a policy like this gets slippery
Oh,
because it could be used against us
I would agree.
on a daily basis.
I'm sure it probably has been.
So the current policy, maybe that's the background, I think I've heard of the original policy, which is just a simple 1 sentence, which isn't the press recommendation. So this has been vetted through many
Right.
attorneys, and this is what they're recommending, but maybe we went back to the simple version for that reason.
But if I even took the last 10 days, last 14 days, take a knee. So if a teacher is talking about current events in class and that teacher happens to represent that it's very appropriate or they condone the take a knee stance, and then somebody in their classroom deems that controversial, they could probably find a bullet point, respect the rights and opinions of everyone, emotional, circumstantial, or hurtful. So then we could actually have a situation come to us as a board that we have to decide on take a knee.
I think the purpose
Or
of
she
adding
would
the
have to.
bullets would be to give teachers a little bit more guidance, because the one right now doesn't really give you any guidance. And really, what we offer to teachers is if there is something, go to your supervisor, go to an administrator and ask, is this appropriate? And, this could be something that's helpful.
I just see in a
But-
current events environment, I think something could become a teachable situation when unintended.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it becomes
We
controversial.
tend not to take policies as one-offs, like this policy tells us everything that we need to know to do our business, because if you look at this policy, it gives some guidance to staff about how to teach these issues. To me, this actually encourages us to delve deeply into controversial issues, but give us guidance on how to do that. So I think this is a positive policy that really encourages staff and gives them some backing to engage students in critical thinking, to engage students in relevant things that are going on, but give staff some guidance about how to do that. There's other policies, John shared some concerns with me about instructional materials. So 6210, which is instructional materials, talks about that. So the selection of those materials and how that goes about, that gives a little bit of, it connects to this policy. Also, we have curriculum objection policy. The board has a curriculum objection policy. So if a parent does find something that we're teaching to be offensive or not right for their student, one, they can opt their student out of that at no penalty to the student. And then two, they can file an objection. And there's a process that the board has in place for filing a curriculum objection. So those two policies are the ones that strike me as related to this policy, which gives it some context. No one policy tells me everything I need to know. Your policies would be very long if they did, but you have a lot of policies, and they all tell me a little piece of how to navigate that and how to help staff navigate that as well.
Thank you.
The second policy that you referenced there,
The curriculum objection one?
yeah, what's the
Let me
number
find
on
that
the-
one.
Is that something maybe you could email us?
Yep.
It's 6260.
Oh, Lisa's got it.
That's why she's the boss lady. Sorry.
So John, was that your only comment about that policy and?
That's
Bob,
my
did you
only
get all your-
comment about that adding language to it.
Okay,
I still would like to see us add those two words to the third bullet point, informative and present a balanced view when appropriate.
John, can you give me an example? When's appropriate? Like, give me an example.
Well, there would be an example, say, I don't know, something crazy, almost impossible to think of, say, the United States invaded a Middle Eastern country. You know, call it that even could happen. In which there are two arguments being presented to the public. And one would want to know that any teacher discussing that with their class is giving, you know, a nod to both arguments. Say Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and is assisting Al-Qaeda, if you remember the press and doing it. And the other argument would be the United Nations argument that he has no weapons of mass destruction and we have no evidence that he is actually tied to Al-Qaeda. So you try to give that balanced
So you give,
view,
but,
right?
but I see exactly what you're saying when appropriate, but isn't both views always given
No, I don't, in my,
for balance, or no?
no, I mean, there's certain things that just don't balance out. I mean, you know, how do you balance the Holocaust?
Okay.
You can't, how do you balance slavery? Do you say the slaves enjoyed it? I mean, that's,
Okay.
history is
Well, that's the
dictionary.
example I wanted.
Right,
I
sure.
wasn't understanding where you were
Sure, I mean,
going.
but there are many, many topics in social studies, which is always very controversial, but there are many, many topics in which one simply wouldn't give what you would call a balanced view. I kind of think when we go with the balanced view, I kind of think of that, you know, here are two sides to the story, make up your own mind, which I think is
so let's just
the
do a quick,
spirit in which this was written.
let's do a quick poll of the board, John, and see where people are landing. Are you guys okay with adding when appropriate? Is that something that you are fine with, or do you say, no, you don't want to change the policy? Sue, are you comfortable weighing in on that yet? Have you thought about it?
I'm not sure.
Okay, no, I'm not sure, it's totally fine. Chris, what about you?
I completely buy the concern, and I can see situations where a balanced view may not necessarily be appropriate because there are people who deny the Holocaust, but personally, I think the facts say that it's not necessarily a balanced view, it happened.
So you're
So I would be,
when appropriate.
but I also know that this was written by lawyers for a very specific
Yeah.
reason, and their phrasing was for
Okay.
very specific purposes, so I would prefer to make sure that there is no downside for adding that information before I agree to it.
Well,
So,
do we have counsel that we can run with?
I agree, I'm okay with adding it, but let's just, for example, what happens, I don't know if this has ever happened, I'm not at the school, you are all in the school, so you're here. What happens if one of our students stands up and says, I'm all for the Holocaust? Are they allowed to give their opinion
well, I mean, so the question
do you know what I'm saying? Like, what would we do in a situation like that?
somebody
Or what happens if one of our students stands up and says, yay, slavery rocks? which I don't hope would happen, but does this prevent, by putting
I
when
don't-
appropriate, does that prevent?
I don't believe
that?
this is a policy so much for how students need to conduct themselves. I believe this is a policy about how we present
Okay.
information.
So we're talking about that.
Okay,
Okay?
So
All
more
right.
importantly, what
So
are
what,
the teachers?
so without, so I'm gonna suggest without this language, what you're asking teachers to do, actually what this policy says as written.
yeah,
When I'm an American history teacher and I'm doing my unit on slavery, according to this, I need to explain why slavery is perfectly appropriate in
So,
order to have a balanced view.
So,
Or when
Bob-
we're discussing racism, I need to balance, you know, the racism is a bad thing with really, you know, people of color are inferior to white people.
all right, so John, Bob, where are you said other than the legal concern. you're-
Yeah, I don't believe the two words hurt us.
Okay, John, how are you?
I'm good.
All right, so are we comfortable with finding out the legal status of adding those two words and ensuring that it doesn't change the flavor and the
Yeah, if
Just
it's
of our
legally
policy
okay,
and
then
then-
fine.
If the legal
Okay.
thing is the holdup, then let me proceed to the next bit, because it's all part and parcel.
Well, except we're talking about this specific policy,
So
so,
I am talking about this specific policy.
wait, I thought you said that was your only point for this policy.
No, that's the only language change I would make for this policy. I would direct everyone's attention to the second footnote.
And how does that relate to the language, John?
Well, you want to know what's legal opinion? And
No,
legal
I want to
opinion-
know how legal opinion specifically addresses that point. What's your,
Well,
can you
okay.
explain your bigger point? You're
The
concerned
bigger
about
point
that
is that the
footnote.
courts, the Fifth Circuit Court, the Seventh Circuit Court, have come down in a series of court cases which, if you read through those footnotes, the second footnote, if you will allow me, public employee First Amendment issues involve the balance between the importance of the speech and the district's interest in maintaining order and effective school operations. The First Amendment, quote, does not entitle primary and secondary teachers when conducting the education of captive audiences to cover topics or advocate viewpoints that depart from the curriculum adopted by the school system, end quote. That's Mayer versus Monroe Community School Court, which I looked up and read the court opinion on. The court also opines in that particular case, Mayer versus Monroe, quote, the school system does not regulate speech as much as it hires speech. Other cases cited here, Pickering and others, the courts have upheld the notion that teachers have no First Amendment rights at all when it comes to curricular decisions. So what the purpose of this particular, as I understand it, the purpose of this particular policy, teaching about controversial issues, is to give teachers some guidance. Yes, Brad? Some guidance on how to approach those controversial issues. If you want the legal opinions, I suggest that you maybe do some background on Mayer versus Monroe County, on Pickering and the others, and you'll find that what the courts have said is that it's entirely the responsibility of the school board to choose the curriculum, to choose the sources, and to even establish the proper viewpoint. So teachers have no actual protection under the court cases. I don't, I don't know what do we need a court, what do we need a legal opinion on here? I'm just asking, I'm not, what
I
are
think
what are
for
we
that
afraid of?
particular one, people were thinking that because I threw out the team of lawyers thing, that we don't want to go against that. I honestly don't see any harm in adding when appropriate because we understand why we added that. And we could point to those examples that you gave and say, that's why we added those two words. So I'm actually feeling like those two words are
Yeah.
fine.
All
And I
right.
was just saying, if we had access to staff that could just say, yeah, those two words don't put you guys in a bad place, then I don't think they could, but, or teachers or anybody in a bad place.
Right, I think you were concerned about unintended consequences.
Correct.
I think it would give, I think it would give us a lot of protection.
I mean, I don't think anyone,
The right direction.
I don't think anyone was concerned about it, John, other than unintended consequences. And I think
Right.
that was the only question.
Well, I have to tell you, when I read through these court cases and did some homework for a couple of days, the back of my mind blew off. Just absolutely blew off, because I was appalled about a couple of things as I've written in the statement. I had no idea that the courts had completely stripped instructors of any kind of ability, legally, any ability to speak their own mind, have their own viewpoint. I didn't realize that it was the sole responsibility of school boards to pick and approve all the materials used.
Oh, I think that's true for, I mean, that's why it all comes to us. But here, Bob, you've only been on the board a shorter time. Brad, can you review for everybody how this process works in our district and how we normally make these decisions?
Sure. This has changed over a period of about 5 years, so the board's direction at that time was to develop a curriculum review process that allowed for a more collaborative approach, because that's one of our commitments to each other through our strategic plan, is that commitment to collaboration. So the board's direction was to develop a plan for curriculum development that matched that commitment. So we have a process that is run by a collaborative group of administrators and teachers on the Curriculum Assessment Advisory Council that has groups working in our core content areas and other areas, and they work to develop curriculum. So last month, was it last month?
I think it was last month with the ELA.
You had the ELA curriculum, you approved that curriculum, you got kind of a high level, but there's a lot of depth to that in what teachers have developed, and it took them about 4 years to develop that. Embedded within that are resources that the board approved in approving the curriculum, because resources is one of the final steps of the curriculum development process, is what are the things that we're going to use to teach these standards and these lessons. So ELA developed units. They went through a process of looking at text and what text is appropriate for students. So when you approved the ELA curriculum, I'm sorry if I wasn't specific about it, but you actually approved hundreds of articles, poems, videos. All of those things were approved as a part of the curriculum for teachers to use. The board's policy on those materials, 6210, instructional materials, has 3 classifications of materials. Anchor materials, things that all kids will be exposed to. So in a classic example, that's your textbook. Then there are supplemental materials. So the boards, this has changed over the past 5 years, they have a classification called supplemental materials. So this is a bank of materials that teachers can go to teach various things. Everyone has different styles, our kids are at different places, they read at different levels, so you have to have a wide variety of materials in that supplemental box in order to teach kids the standards that you're after in that unit. And then there's a third classification of responsive materials. And there's really no process other than the guidance that we're giving here for responsive materials, because things happen. So we had a tragic event in Las Vegas. Teachers need to talk about that in their classrooms. They should be talking about that, because the kids are, and they can bring in materials, responsive materials, to talk about that. So if they bring in a newspaper article from that day's paper, that's classified as a responsive material. So those are the 3 classifications in your board's policy about the types of materials. In the curriculum, we never put the responsive materials, because they should be like on the fly materials that we're using in our class to teach a particular subject for a particular group of students at a particular time. Now, if that works out really well, we would hope the teachers would start to talk to their colleagues about putting that in the supplemental box. And out of the supplemental, we would hope that if something keeps working with kids over and over again, we would move it up in classification to that anchor material. So that's how the board has instructed us to work, and that's how our groups are working. Unfortunately, it takes a really long period of time for us to get everything together, because we do pilot things several times before we bring it to you for approval. Because once you approve it, if there are substantial changes, we would need to bring them back. So we try and get things right the first time before having you, or you'd be approving curriculum, kind of each semester for us. So we try and get it right through pilots.
So I have a question, because if I'm understanding John's argument, is that if it hasn't actually come to us and officially been approved by us, so say we're piloting it, it hasn't been approved by us, and that leaves the teachers potentially at risk of not having their First Amendment rights, if I'm understanding.
My understanding from reading the cases is they don't have any to begin with.
Well, right, but he's saying that they have no defense if we haven't
Well,
approved
they
it.
don't.
Right.
I mean,
If we have
that's
not
not my
approved
opinion, that's the court's.
Even
right.
if we have.
Even if we approve it,
They don't
they
have,
don't.
I mean,
Oh,
this court case pretty much
right, but his
says no one
concern is
has-
that if we've approved it, then that at least they're covered by the fact that then the liability is with us and not with them personally.
Presumably, if the board has approved the material, and there's a complaint over a controversial subject, and the board has approved that material, the teacher has some coverage from the administrators and the board itself. You follow me?
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that I'm understanding the
Yeah.
problem before I.
The problem is, according to, say, Mayor versus Monroe County.
Super scary.
It is super scary.
It's
You and I
super
may be
scary.
the only ones who read that actual case. For those who didn't, let me fill you in. This is an elementary school teacher who taught 3rd to 6th grade in a small district, and during a civics lesson during the Iraq invasion, one of her students asked if she had participated in an anti-war demonstration. She said, "No, I haven't. But there was a demonstrator that held up a sign that said, 'Honk for peace,' and I honked." Well, that was enough to infuriate many parents in her district, and she was eventually dismissed. So this is when that case is cited as a footnote in this policy with the particular court opinion, I paid close attention. Because the reason the footnote is here, and that particular court opinion, is, I should think, to put teachers on notice that they don't have First Amendment rights.
It's interesting that it's footnoted.
But I don't
next to
think there's any
educational
question,
purpose.
I mean, whether we agree or not agree, the court cases have come down. So we're back to, let's talk about our policy. We have teacher voice. We have a robust procedure for bringing curriculum. So where would we like to go from here?
I would like those two words added.
Right.
And
I
I
think
would
we're all
also like
comfortable
for us
with
to think, and I do believe, Brad, I think that the process that we have in place for the 3 separate categories of materials is a very good one, and I think it gives teachers a lot of leeway in order to be able, I know in my discipline, Mr. Holm and Mr. Barrett here, and I'm sure they can attest to this, in our discipline, you have to be able to move fast on this because current events that's part of your classroom, right? And that's a good thing. My concern is that our teachers, because we have such a void of material actually approved based on the court cases, my concern is that we have teachers legally exposed. I've not known us to
Legally exposed to
throw
what, Ted?
anyone under the bus.
Legally exposed to what?
Well, the courts have argued that if we haven't approved a specific material, a specific source, if the board hasn't approved it, or a specific viewpoint, and it's a crazy place to be, but this is what the boards have ruled, or the courts have ruled, that if we haven't approved that, and a teacher uses it, and there's a significant complaint, that teacher is the one that's exposed. Not the board, the teacher.
May I suggest that we discuss this under a discussion of policy 6-210, where we're actually approving the materials? That sounds to me like.
I think that's
It seems to me like that would be a more
I
appropriate
think
place to have
that's
the
absolutely
discussion.
appropriate, and we probably ought to look at 2 6-0 as well in conjunction. But for right now, I would be satisfied to have these 2 words added to this teaching controversial issues. And then I would suggest that maybe down the road, we would start to discuss some kind of board policy on academic freedom, where we give them some kind of protection in the board policy.
We can certainly add that for discussion if there's a
And there
consensus that we'd like to talk about
There are
it.
some districts that have that language in their contracts. I'm certainly, I can find the language and bring it and see what we think.
Can I ask a
State of
question?
California does.
Sorry?
I think state of California has that.
And Brad, you brought up the Las Vegas incident, so I'm thinking on this, and just on a side note, I wish I would have seen this a few days earlier, just to digest it more. But that's just a,
That's
But
an
John,
open
we're not
meeting, that's an
changing
open meeting
anything.
fact.
I mean,
But
that's
that's-
the beauty of it, we're not changing anything
I know.
from it, so we can take it.
but that's why
digest
now
it, talk about
I'm
it,
just
yeah.
trying to process everything. But to go maybe with John, and I want to see if I'm kind of in the right area of what I'm thinking. So now, if you're saying bring up the Las Vegas incident, the shooting. So now we're talking about the Second Amendment. Pro and
Danger,
con.
Will Robinson.
And this is where, I'm just trying to get an idea on where then, because on one hand, I'm hearing that the teachers, if, depending on if they're on the one side or the other side, and it gets really the classroom all riled up, and then we get a lot of complaints on it, what happens then? So who's being protected there? So that's where I'm trying to figure this out a little bit on if it's going to be one of those things at a last minute situation where something is not going to be approved, or that, you know, who would have thought this? I mean, yes, we've had some in the past, unfortunately, the shootings in Orlando and Sandy Hook and all that, but I'm just saying, where are we careful on this? And I mean, I don't mind adding the words, I don't even need to talk to the lawyers, or something. If this is what we agree on, fine. I'm just wondering, Brad, how would that be protected of a teacher that, let's just say, is on one side and gets bombarded on something else?
So that court case would give you guidance to say that the teacher doesn't have the First
Right.
Amendment right to talk about what their position is?
Right, but don't you feel like as a district, we should try to protect our educators a little more? Like, I feel like there should be
Our
language added in front
educators
of the
are
footnote.
very protected. There are lots of due process rights. So if there was a complaint, there are lots of due process rights. So if someone files a curriculum objection, we get together a team, they can appeal that decision of that team to you. So the board has control of that. So they can take ownership over those decisions. If a teacher's going to be suspended, they can appeal that. There's due process rights, and they can appeal that to the Board of Education. So there are plenty of due process rights available to teachers. I don't want teachers to hear this discussion and be afraid to talk about controversial issues, because I really think they are good at presenting balanced viewpoints. And I think some of our best teachers, you don't know what they believe,
Right.
because they're always challenging beliefs, and they're always challenging them on different sides.
That's the only reason why I brought it
Our
up.
instructors are really good at that piece, and if there are complaints, we deal with those complaints. We have a uniform grievance process that we go through, and a teacher would have to be like willful and wanton in their disregard for board policy in order for that to be, discipline worthy. That, I can tell you, it doesn't happen in our district. Sometimes people need some guidance and support in, like, what does this mean and how might I do this again because of some complaints. But really, it's not a very serious issue that we deal with very often.
Okay.
in our
My concern was, you have the curriculum, you know the curriculum ahead of time, you can plan, you do your lessons, you do your lectures, you do your debates and all that. But if something like this that just happened, now it's off the cuff, you're trying to figure it out.
Mhm.
That's all, and that's all I'm just trying to figure
Our
out.
teachers
But
are
that's
human,
where
and
the policy
our
comes
teachers
in,
are human, and
because
they make mistakes, and they sometimes apologize
Right,
for those
John,
mistakes too. It's
the-
not, they don't need to be
they
flawless.
still have to get balance. That's part of what they do. So even if it's not part of the curriculum, they're gonna have the discussion.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's,
Please don't
right?
misread me. This teaching tolerance policy, I think with a simple amendment is fine. Please understand what I'm trying to explain. As I read through the court cases, I felt overwhelmed that the courts have put all of that responsibility on school boards.
Oh, yeah, that's,
The
that's for
thought that a
sure.
school board not only would have to approve every source, but endorse specific viewpoints. It seems crazy to me. And yet this is what they've ruled. So I understand perfectly that there's simply no way that any school board is going to approve all that source material. We couldn't, we'd be buried, and it would be cumbersome and silly. In light of that, I have to ask myself, then what guarantees can we put into place for teachers? If it's in writing, yes, Fred, you're right, we haven't had a problem. God forbid you all go away someday, we have all different superintendents and people and who knows, right? So something in writing that gives us some kind of academic freedom, some kind of protection, I would feel better about. Because I do think we've got great teachers, and they really do a great job in pushing the envelope and pushing critical thinking, and that's something we want to encourage.
Then I would suggest that we put it on an agenda for a discussion later.
Right.
I think that one of the reasons why we're sort of all like maybe sitting here without a lot of reaction is we have so much teacher voice, and our teachers are such an integral part of the decision making and the recommendations that come to us, that I think that I'm kind of hearing like, well, that's decided with teachers, that's decided with teachers. And so I think that there's sort of a general attitude that we're not a board that's like, you're on your own, we're saying, come to us. We want your voice. Be a part of this process. And so while I completely understand the legality issue, I think, like, I know where I am and maybe other board members are, like, that's never the way we've done our business. So it boggles my mind to think that suddenly we'd start doing business that way. And I think that's why it's a hard. But certainly let's put it on the agenda later, for a later discussion
If you
about
would like to
academic
come back to
freedom.
this, if you want to wait another couple of weeks, John, do you like time to process?
Well, actually, John, we have a handful of things coming. It takes us a little bit for them to come to us, but it will, I'm gonna have Dr. Hitchens put it on our future.
Is that part of
list.
discussing with 6 to 10?
No, I think
Or is this separate?
We can certainly put 6 to 10 on there with the academic freedom.
I mean,
don't
I'm
know,
just
John.
wondering where that academic freedom falls. I mean, are we
Well, I
going to
think that
discuss
would be
that?
part of our discussion.
I will
Do we need
I
that?
will bring language back to the board and put a motion on the table with specific language that you can.
I would prefer to
add
bring
it to
the
the
general
board.
topic first, and let's make sure we're all in agreement that we want specific language. That's kind of, unfortunately, you missed our one last meeting, but you know how we've been talking about how we want to do our business? So one of the things we talked about, John, was let's make sure we're all moving in the same direction so that I'm not, or Tina's not, or you're not like furthering so let's have a general discussion about what we think it should look like. Then we'll send you off to work with an administrator to maybe put language together. If we're like, yeah, we kind of get the nugget of what we want, then you'll bring it back, we'll discuss it further. That's kind of what we're doing with the policy tonight that you'll see for the extracurriculars. We talked about it, we decided, do we kind of have a general consensus? Awesome, then we went and sent some people out. I think, Bob, you were the one who rewrote that?
No, Lisa rewrote it, I just worked with it.
I was giving you a
That
little-
Very honest.
That wasn't your job. Your job was to go help write it.
Well, I'm
So
gonna
what do you-
admit I didn't do
So we're
great.
gonna bring it back, we'll have a discussion about our general direction and understanding of what we would want if we wanna add a policy such as that. Then we'll send you off to work with someone to potentially put some language together, and then we will bring it back and talk about it further.
Okay, what do you want to do with this particular
So are
policy?
we
right?
So
approving the two
Can I vote
words?
on that?
What,
Are we approving then the two words
that's what I was
that I
gonna say,
added?
are we all comfortable adding those 2 words? I feel like everyone said yes?
I mean,
Comfortable with that?
I still sit in the
Yes.
same boat, but if everybody else is comfortable with voting on it, then I'm fine with voting on it. I would prefer to run it by somebody else.
I would not, yeah.
I'm
All right, well, I feel like there's a consensus that's comfortable with it, so I would entertain a motion to approve policy 6080 with the words when appropriate added at the end of the second bullet point.
Third
That-
bullet point, please.
Third bullet
So
point.
a
thank
third
you,
bullet
Jen.
point would read informative and present a balanced view
When appropriate.
when appropriate.
All right, so I entertain a motion to approve that policy as amended.
So moved.
Yeah.
Second,
Moved by Gaspar, second by Dryden. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Baby Bar,
Yes.
Blakely,
Yes.
Dryden,
yes.
Gaspar,
Yes.
Locke,
No,
no,
I just,
Lowe,
I'd rather.
Abstain. So is that 511?
It's 511.
Thank you.
So the last part of our policy discussion tonight is the extracurricular policy, which the board gave us direction. Just a little history, the board had mentioned that they wanted to ensure that our students were having good experiences and talked about evaluating the programs and the sponsors. And so this was probably a couple different months worth of discussion that we listened to what you had to say and we tried to put it together into this neat little package. And so Bob did give me some feedback about it. If you look at that draft, what we did was we combined our own version that we used to have with the press version. The first statement there is about the philosophy that you guys approve of programs that contribute to good citizenship. Those were the character pieces that you wanted to make sure the character development was at the forefront. The second number is about finances. We had it in the policy before that that activity would not negatively impact district's finances. And then we also said that dues have to be reasonable and cannot exceed the actual cost of operation. The leadership piece, this is what I heard that you guys were saying, was that the activity will be supervised by a school-approved sponsor who promotes the district's philosophy and strives for maximizing student growth. Under participation, we want extracurriculars that encourage students to join and that they solicit new members and reach as many students as possible. It's not always possible to have the entire student body in an extracurricular, but we want to reach as many as possible. Under evaluation, I said that the sponsor will monitor participation and feedback to ensure experiences are fulfilling and fun for the participants. And as a side note, we have that stipend committee that will also be tackling this as well. So the stipend committee will be meeting starting October 16th, I think is their first meeting of this school year, and they'll be talking about how to evaluate those programs. We have a informal process right now, and they're going to talk about formalizing that a little bit more. And then under new activities, if there is a new activity, we would approve it using the criteria above that I just talked you through, and that we also encourage students and community members to help us think of ideas and support new ideas and clubs and activities for kids.
I just have a question about 5, the evaluation. I thought, is our athletic director not evaluating anymore?
So, like I said, the athletic director does. Right now, what we have is that the athletic director meets with all of the head coaches at the beginning of their season. They set goals for the year, and then they meet again at the end of the season. They talk about their goals and whether or not they met them. So that's the evaluation that happens right now. And then the stipend committee is going to take that process that we use, because that's not in writing anywhere, and they're going to formalize it. So Steve, I keep pointing to Steve because he's going to be leading the stipend committee. So in the union contract, the BEA contract, it does say that one of their goals is to evaluate the programs.
Okay. I thought at one point we discussed making sure feedback was gotten from all participants and opening a door for parents, and I thought we talked about putting this in here.
So that would be tactical. So the stipend committee knows that under the evaluation, it says the sponsor will monitor participation and feedback. So the sponsor has to be getting feedback. We're going to turn that over to the stipend committee then to say, how are you going to get that feedback?
So are we going to incorporate the stipend committee's results to this policy, or are we just planning on making that part of how we operate, but not necessarily part of policy?
So what you guys are asking is to say the coaches, the parents have to be able to take surveys about the coaches. And that's pretty, like if that's what the stipend committee comes up with, we thought that that was more tactical. So as a board, you guys have a philosophy, and I was trying to keep it philosophical and strategic here, and then turn it over to them. And if they decide that you guys, that we have to give parents surveys about the coaches and the sponsors, then that would be on them.
Think about how big that last policy we just voted on was.
I'm actually, first of all, I don't think that was, I don't think we wanted parents surveyed, but I think the discussion was on how do we create an environment where our players and participants and parents are comfortable coming to someone for an evaluation, for a question or concern, without it affecting their student. And we discussed that it would have to be in some, we would be putting this in here in some form of an evaluation. So we never actually discussed that it would be a survey, but where is that?
So are you
being
looking at the
written?
monitoring piece? Like, how do we know it's happening? How do we ensure that it's following the philosophy and the big ideas in this policy?
Well, yeah, I mean, how do we know this is being done?
So in
So
my
that's-
mind, we are turning it over to the
But
stipend
how,
committee.
but this
So
is
that's
also
the
just our
monitoring.
evaluator. Where is the feedback from from our participants in any of these activities? Not just athletic. We discussed all activities.
Right,
Where
that's
is-
Yeah,
the thing here is
so there's an
extracurricular.
expectation that they will be getting, they'll be,
Monitoring feedback.
So my
so
question is,
there's going to be some expectation that there is feedback
Yes.
Yeah.
From who?
from participants.
All
for sure.
participants.
The stipend committee will determine that.
So it seems
So,
to me.
so we're leaving it up to the stipend committee to decide whether or not they want feedback from parents or students.
No, you're saying in here that
Yeah, we're
number
saying
5
expect it.
evaluation says feedback. Therefore, the stipend committee is going to take the board's direction, and they're going to determine how that's going to look.
Are we approving anything that comes from the stipend committee? Or whatever the stipend committee comes up with, is that what's we have to go with?
so isn't
We have a
this,
board member on. John accepted my invitation.
isn't the stipend committee really the one that should be ultimately responsible for the evaluation? I mean, granted, they're gonna work, I mean, maybe the stipend,
Well, that's what we're
Wait,
saying based
No,
on this.
Stipend committee, maybe I misunderstood you. What did you say?
well, I mean, I'm reading this and I understand Tina's point in that the way that I read this is it sounds like the person who's in charge of the group is the one that is going to collect feedback and do the evaluation and determine what changes need to be done. But it sounds like the way that we're actually practicing that is we are going to have both of our athletic director and the stipend committee who is going to be responsible for kind of deciding whether or not we're going to continue an activity, how the
Stipend committee is
sponsors-
not responsible to evaluate like sponsors or anything like that.
No, they're just going to evaluate whether or not a club is going to.
They have a
continue
very
to do
clear
this.
direction in the contract. I don't know if Lisa wants to read that or cite that.
Well, we also, I
It's
mean,
to
I know
develop.
that. Okay,
Go ahead.
go
I
ahead.
think the bigger question here is, I don't think any of us ever had a concern with the policy. I think the question is like, we don't know what happens as a board.
No,
We're
I don't
like-
know if that's my question. I think we've
But if there are
discussed this quite a
concerns,
bit, and
we don't know what happens, or
Yeah.
we may not be happy with, if there are concerns, necessarily, we're not sure we're happy with how it's being handled. Is that what you're saying?
well, we've brought this up many times, that if there is a complaint, and we, as board members, hear these complaints on a regular basis, and we go through the chain of command, and we go through it, but then we end up where we're, in closed session, because there's issues, and we're trying to avoid that. And we discussed that we were gonna work this into the new stipend committee with the new contract and this new evaluation, but I'm not sure I feel that's clear on what we've discussed for months.
So you feel like
Here.
the evaluation is not maybe as deep as you wanted it to
We
go?
also discussed how are we monitoring our stipend employees? We, as a board, discussed the millions of dollars being put out for stipends, but as a board, we have never seen any of the evaluations for any of our
Well, and I don't
stipends.
necessarily know that we need to see the evaluation.
Well-
No, but
I
we
feel
also
that
have
we
never
have
been
a
given,
process.
no, but you know what I'm saying, we have never been given feedback.
I'm saying, I think the bigger question again, we know what the process is for everything else. I don't even know that we're comfortable that there is a process. Like, we've never really talked about it.
I would
and now we're
disagree.
going-
We've talked many times about what they do, like at the high school with Dave Andrews and evaluating the different sports and meeting with the coaches. We've talked about that.
We've talked about that, but
Yeah.
then we know exactly what happens. If a teacher is awesome, we know that there's a process they go through and they get that feedback and whatever. We know that there's a conversation had.
So at the conclusion of the stipend committee's work, what I'm hearing you say is that you're gonna definitely want to understand the process that is developed.
And we
Correct?
discussed this because we need to answer to the community. And
Right,
that's
sure.
how, this is how it all started. So when we have community members coming to us saying this, we want to be able to say to them, this is what's done.
Well-
And so that's how this all started. We
And-
need to be able to give
And
them,
we're stating a policy of evaluation.
Right.
They're gonna develop the process
Right.
of evaluation.
We're saying yes, the
and present
evaluation
that
has to
us.
happen.
So the question that I have
So
is, should
this
the
is
policy of
policy.
evaluation say that our sponsors are going to be evaluated? It doesn't have to say how, it doesn't have to say when or how often, just the fact that we do evaluate our sponsors.
I believe, I know at least in the case of athletics, I believe that that evaluation is part of their overall evaluation as instructors, is it not?
No,
No.
It should be separate.
no, because
It's a separate
because it's
thing
under a
altogether?
stipend.
So maybe the
But does
addition
it
of a
happen?
monitoring number? like
Well, then, I mean, but this
5.5?
is how this discussion started about a year ago.
So basically, Tina, what you're saying is that, let's just use coaches.
I don't know,
No, no, let me
remember, I
just-
don't
let me-
want to
let-
use
let-
just
let-
athletics, because this is not about
I-
No, he's
athletics.
just
Let me just-
creating a
let me
framework.
just
Creating
use-
a
An
framework.
example.
Okay.
of clarity.
Forget coaches. Anybody that sponsors a club. I'm
Right,
gonna leave the coaches out for a second then, okay? We're talking about they're being evaluated by someone, just as they were a teacher in the classroom, on how they're doing their job with that club, right?
well, that,
Yes?
yes,
Okay. The same way we would then evaluate the coaches, exactly how we would evaluate them in the classroom, but on the coaching part.
Well, I'm
That-
I'm not sure I
Is
think
that
it
what
needs
we're
to be
looking,
as
is that what we're looking
extensive
at?
that
Because I
way.
thought that's what we were looking at for evaluating.
I think that that's one of the discussions is what are we talking about evaluating?
That's what I was
And
interpreting.
when we started this discussion, it was how are they being evaluated and who are they getting their feedback from? And that was something that we were concerned about because I thought that's where we were going.
But
Not a
process
bad
is
thing,
tactical.
but how are
Well,
we evaluating
Are we
them
actually evaluating them in a way that is aligned with our goals?
with our
That was the
goals?
question.
And
Is
one of
our-
our goals is with our community and our players, so, and our participants. So that was, again, this has been a discussion and whether this is the time, but I keep hearing this.
No, this is the
Again,
time.
I'm not the smartest
Yeah.
guy in the room, and you guys are light years ahead of me. I understand 6.190 extracurricular activities draft. The way this reads is this would essentially be the rubric for evaluating a sponsor of an organization.
Correct, but nowhere
Part
in
of
here.
that rubric, number 5, this is where we got bogged down, is asking the sponsor of that organization to evaluate their program through appropriate methodology, which Steve is saying is something that the stipend committee will map out. How will we do that? So I, as the sponsor of an organization, am getting feedback from those people who are participating in it, and I will know what I'm doing well and what I'm not doing well, and what they're satisfied with and what they're not satisfied with. That's different than evaluating the sponsor themselves. It seems to me that this is an outline of a rubric that one would use for some kind of evaluation.
But it doesn't say
of
that's
that
happening,
particular
and I think that
sponsor.
was Tina's concern.
So we
Correct.
should add a number 7
I think so.
about monitoring.
Well, I mean, I think that's been a discussion for a while.
Right, I understand we've discussed
Right.
it.
Or
What I'm-
evaluation.
what I'm
For
asking
sure
you for
monitoring.
help, what I'm asking you for help with
Yeah.
is what does that number 7 monitoring look like?
I don't know do you think it needs to be a number 7, or is
Or it
it
could be
something
part of
that
the
can be
evaluation.
part of number 5?
Well, I just liked it because it had a different word, so each word's got a
It
number.
also,
But it's evaluating still. So we're both evaluating the
Except-
program
right,
and the sponsor running the program. And right now, it only says that we're evaluating the program. So I agree that it needs to be vague because we need to be tactical.
but you'd like some clarity, is what I'm hearing. You'd like some clarity that we're actually also just doing some sort of evaluation of how is that person performing.
That our sponsors are not on monitor.
Yes.
I would,
So
I
that's
would,
not-
I would like to say that there's not situations where they're not monitored.
Well, we agree that they're monitored, but our policy doesn't say that we are actually monitoring them, is what I'm saying.
So if we think about
Okay.
teacher appraisal, or your teacher appraisal document isn't in your policy, but it exists. So to go back to what Kathy said, after the stipend committee can formalize this, then you can actually see that, just like you could see the teacher appraisal, even though it's not connected to your policy. You still should be able to see with your eyes what that looks like, which is what we're promising from the stipend committee.
Yes. My only other caution is that we oftentimes have trouble getting sponsors and coaches for a lot of different niche events. And when they start to hear things about, all kinds of evaluations and this, a lot of good people who do good work, I'm concerned because I sort of feel like, Tina, when you evaluate a program, that's a direct evaluation of the person running the program. When I think about, our various sports, because that pops into my mind first and foremost, you think about the program. What happens in that program is a direct reflection of how that head coach or that freshman coach or whatever is leading. So
Exactly.
yeah.
But that's exactly my point.
Right.
So when we.
So I don't know if we're too far apart then.
No,
No, I
my
don't
point, so in those situations, I don't want anyone to not participate. I don't want someone to not want to coach or anything like that. But again, as a board member, I have to answer to parents who have questioned me numerous times, and I've shared all of those questions, all of those situations with most of you at one point. So I understand that may make a teacher hesitant, but I also have to be able to say to a parent, I hear what you're saying, but let me tell you, this is how we handle those things. They have been evaluated. They are being, and it's part of our policy, and we don't have that right now.
Yeah, and certainly we can say that we've evaluated. There's at least a process in place to evaluate sports.
I mean, we know the chain
far
of
more than
command.
stipend activities.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
But Tina, shouldn't our answer be, you know what? It'd probably be best for you to go right to Sarah
And,
Thomas.
but that is
and
our
Yes.
answer right now, but at this point, there is nothing formal, there is nothing formally done.
And
So
I
now, adding this, I would have a different answer.
Well,
Yeah,
and
but
here's the
given that same
question.
policy that we just approved, I would never send a parent to go look at that policy.
Oh, no, I don't,
Never.
I don't
She
send a
can
parent to
do
a
it.
policy, I can
She
say,
can
we have a policy, I would never say, hey, go look at it.
See,
But
and-
here's my question. If we get monitoring information, I mean, I feel like, okay, we've made a change with the stipend committee. And now we need to let that change happen.
We haven't
need
met
to
yet.
monitor that change, and we need to see whether or not it is consistent then, if it's actually meeting all of these goals that are stated in our philosophy. So I feel like the bigger question that I'm hearing, even though no one's articulated it, is we want to know, how do we know if our policy's working? How do we know, what information will we have, how will it be communicated to us, so we know? So that if there's still a concern, we can say, well, I feel like this part's not being addressed with the information I'm getting.
I think my concern is slightly different in that I totally buy what you're saying, Steve, in that we need to make sure that we have enough good sponsors and that we're not overburdening them with paperwork and jumping through hoops. I'm more concerned with if the board makeup changes, if the administration makeup changes, and the goals change, and all of a sudden they decide that they want to change the way that they're evaluating or whatnot. We have nothing in our policy that says, hey, we are evaluating our sponsors.
But there's nothing to change somebody from that happening anyway.
There's
I mean,
actually
you
a
can
committee,
change
there's a collaborative
policy.
committee actually that has contract language that says they will develop an evaluation of programs.
Which is, and so I'm wondering, should that be referenced here so that we can say, hey, we've got the,
I don't know if our teacher appraisal is referenced in our
No.
policy,
I think
but
that's-
people know that we appraise our teachers.
And it's also in our collective bargaining agreement.
I think that's the difficulty with, like, even what Brad mentioned earlier, how you can't take any one piece as in isolation, that it works with all these other pieces. And yeah, there's always the danger that either people don't know or things can change. But this is the first time we've talked about it. We have a new stipend committee. We're not going to know whether or not it's meeting all of the concerns that we have until we have that work done and have some feedback and some monitoring.
That's true.
So what kind of reporting will you be able to do back to us, and when could we expect it?
I don't know, we have a lot of work to do.
Right.
We literally have not met, it's a new group, we don't have a charge statement, we haven't developed our values, it's gonna take time.
So can we have maybe like a quarterly update, maybe
Sure.
once you've got your document? We'd be able to see
I would
that.
happily share with full transparency whatever we come up with.
When do you anticipate meeting?
We're meeting October 16th. I was given the members of the team by October 1st.
And that's partly why we're talking about it, because we wanted to have sort of this philosophical and this before they started their work, because if we were gonna put the brakes on or change the direction that we were sending them, which I don't think we are. I think we just need to.
No, and I appreciate the message. This gives me significant direction as we work as a team to determine this. So I appreciate that. And I'm all for sharing how we're moving along in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I agree that this has been a long conversation, and I apologize that it's been so long, and I do feel as if we're on the right track, and we did some Band-Aid approaches, like people are being evaluated by their supervisor at the high school. So their coaches are meeting with their supervisor, and the sponsors are meeting with their supervisor. We added a little Band-Aid, but we knew this was coming, and I'm sorry that it's taking so long. And what I love about this is that it is a joint collaboration. You guys have a voice at this committee. John's on the committee. And then we have, Steve that will facilitate, and the staff will have their voice as well. So they're gonna come up with something really good, and we will be very clear so that you can communicate that back out to
to add to
parents.
that, the staff was communicated with who applied to be on this, that this isn't gonna be like the stipend committee was in the past, where it's this, hey,
Stipend, yeah.
we're handing out this stipend, we're handing out this stipend. This is gonna be work. This is gonna be really coming together and determining, making some tough decisions. So, we've sent that message out to the people that are gonna be a part of this, that this is gonna be some difficult work. And because of that, that's why I'm telling you, this isn't gonna happen overnight. It's not gonna happen overnight. I mean, I'm hopeful we can get moving here and then get a regular schedule of meetings and get to work. So I'll keep you updated.
Tentatively schedule after the beginning of the new year. We can have.
Yeah,
an update
let's
just where
schedule
you're
something
at.
in a board meeting in January. I can give you an update.
Just tell us where you're at.
Can we go over some
I'll
other
put it on
items
the
this?
parking lot.
What else did you have on here, Chris?
Well, question that I have is first regarding the finance section. It
Uh-huh.
says activity will not negatively impact the district's overall finances. The way that I read it is, it sounds like we aren't going to allow any of our activities to lose money, which obviously is not the case. And clearly there are going to be some activities that the participants are not paying the same percentage of the actual activity costs that others may be. So it seems really vague in saying that it will not negatively impact.
So what was the
Does
purpose behind that?
Does co-curricular fall into this too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is an excellent example. So winter color guard. The cost for someone to participate in winter color guard, if the district was going to pay the full vote for that, is like $1,500 per kid, something insane. So there's no way that the district would be able to do that because it's so cost prohibitive. So they have a booster group that makes up a huge difference, and the kids still pay $330 or $350 per kid to do that. So this statement is simply about there's no way that the school can fund a program just because a program exists.
So, I
You
mean,
can't take a negative hit to.
the question that I have is our philosophy going into this that whatever the budget item that we have for stipends determines whether or not it negatively impacts our finances? Or is there some other criteria based on the specific amount of money or percentage that an activity is losing that makes it excessive, so that all of a sudden it is negatively impacting our finances?
So let's clarify that then.
Yeah,
What does it
we
mean?
haven't done that in the past, but we've gone and figured out the cost.
And I'm not saying that we need to, I'm just saying that the way that it's phrased, that's what it's
What is our
making me
thoughts
wonder.
behind the meaning,
Well-
the meaning of how that's phrased?
So I took it from, this was language that
We already
existed
had.
before.
Right.
It
Right.
might even be from press. I think that it just means that that gives you the right if you are in a budget crisis, and it would mean that, if we're having to make those really tough decisions, that's not a guarantee that you're going to have those co-curriculars if it
there's
means
a-
that we have to raise class size to 50.
So is this gonna instruct us to prioritize based on who's losing the most money then in that situation?
I don't think this talks at all about total cost of programs. I think it's just that any activity, we may have to assess whether or not it's negatively impacting.
Okay, I thought it was
Is,
excessively
are you
vague.
guys uncomfortable or unclear, John, Bob?
I'm fine with how it is.
I think it's as specific as it needs to be.
I look
Okay,
at this
Sue,
as
you
criteria.
comfortable?
Yeah.
Okay, so Chris, your
That's fine,
concerns
yeah,
are well
that-
noted,
yeah,
but I
that's
think
fine.
that everyone else, all right, what else did you have?
And then under participation, it says, we will encourage participation, solicit new members, and reach as many students as possible. I'm wondering if that should be as reasonable, because clearly there are some activities where we are not seeking out as many as possible because it's a cut activity. We can only have a limited number, or because we are limiting it to people who have certain skills.
Is that how you guys are reading that? Are you uncomfortable with that language? What?
I can't.
Oh, here.
Sorry.
Gentleman at the end,
No, I'm good with how it is.
Yeah, possible,
Dryden?
reasonable,
Can you show
possible.
me what's on that?
Right here, it says, the activity will
So
encourage
you're saying
participation,
possible
solicit
She said
new
it's
members,
fine, yeah.
and reach
And
as
you're
many
saying
students
possible
as
is fine.
possible.
Yeah,
But
That's
clearly
how it
there are
is.
activities where we are cutting people.
Sue's fine.
No.
I
I think it's a little clumsy.
It is. I don't know how
I
to
think it's
make
a
it any
little
different
clumsy.
though. It is
But you could encourage people to
It
try.
was.
Is that the one,
Bob?
Bob?
Yes, it is.
Doug on it, Bob?
Well, but we're talking about participation, we're not talking about whether or
I mean,
not.
I think
As a
possibility is covered.
standard.
Participating is trying out.
I disagree with you.
Flag
Part
activity
of the
that
activity
just can't
is paying
take
the fee, you're not
I,
gonna-
I
Why is it
understand
so
why,
bad?
I understand the intent.
Why is it so bad the way it is?
Well, Chris does make a good point.
Actually, we have.
You don't necessarily want the basketball
Want to change it?
team required to recruit.
We're writing it from scratch, so it's not like there is and is.
If they go
Well,
up, they
no,
go up, they make
as-
cuts.
I would have to hear,
Well, this
I
is-
think I want to know what your thoughts
As
are.
many as
and
possible.
Solicit
change it
new
to.
members.
Well, I suggested that we change it
So they're gonna,
to,
they're gonna make the team.
As appropriate for that activity.
Oh,
As
they were-
appropriate for that activity.
John Dryden, as
Or
appropriate
reasonable.
for that activity?
I mean, not every.
It's the as appropriate clause.
I think that's
Twice
fine.
tonight.
As
We
appropriate.
like-
for them.
If
As
you put it
appropriate
as appropriate for that activity, that makes
There you go.
sense.
Love it.
All right, we're all good.
That's it.
Next question.
No.
All right, so,
This was our first reading of this draft. This was
Yeah.
the first time you saw it.
any other questions, concerns? Then I'm going to suggest that we ruminate on this, bring it back next month.
Yeah, I'll bring it back as a second reading and I'll make that
Do
change.
we need to put anything about the monitoring? We don't normally talk about the monitoring in the policy, right? That's just part of what our normal processes are.
Can't hurt to have it in writing for Steve to bring back to the group, so, wait,
So,
the monitoring, are you talking
Just the fact
about?
that we will monitor. I feel like the monitoring we do is just normally part of our work.
Mhm.
I don't feel like the policy necessarily has to discuss the monitoring that
Okay.
we're looking for.
Well, maybe if there was a problem with what we came up with and we need to make adjustments, then you direct us to do that, and maybe you change the policy then, I don't know.
But that would still be a management issue, and I
Sure.
don't think it affects the policy.
I put the monitoring on our parking lot,
Yeah.
things to bring back.
Okay. All right, any other questions about this policy? All right, nice discussion, we'll bring it back next month.
Okay.
On to the next item.
Oh, the next item was, so last week, at our last meeting, we finalized, we had a consultant come in and help the board talk about the way that they do their business, and we talked about giving a charge to the administration. And so this was our attempt at applying what we learned in that workshop. So Sue actually helped me with this one and gave me some feedback
Okay.
and no, she gave me feedback. And so why don't you take a moment to read over that and tell me what your questions are related to that chart.
I will say that I think this is a much better start than where we started before,
Okay?
based on what we've recently learned, that this is pretty much what we are, what I thought the Capital Improvement Committee was looking for, is a long-term master plan, so.
Would have been nice to have this right out of the gate.
John
It would have
Gaspar,
saved us a lot of time and made us more efficient, but we
John
learned.
Gaspar, I know you had some
That large.
thoughts on this previously because it was so broad. Does this new charge as amended allay some of those concerns you had?
Not really. So I'm
shocked.
just gonna go see where it leads to.
You think it's too big?
I just don't see the need for it at this point.
Well,
I
the
still don't, so I mean, that's why.
Capital Projects Committee specifically asked us for this
I know,
direction.
and I
though,
just
so-
say they can
So
come
you're
up,
telling them that,
they just let us know what they've been doing and we go from there and
John Dryden, how do you feel about this?
feel anything about this. It
So-
doesn't bring
so
out any
capital
emotion.
projects don't
No, there's
excite you?
no
This is
emotion
not where your
on
heart
my part
is?
at all here about.
I'm sort of
this.
disappointed after your passion earlier
Well-
that it dissipated.
It's hard for me to get emotionally wrapped up in
Capital
bricks and
expenditures?
mortars. Yeah. So, I
Do you have
just
any
pass on.
reservations?
I don't have reservations on it.
You're fine.
Right now, it's so broad, I just, as John says, I would have to see where it goes.
Bob?
This is the most amazing, by far, strategic charge that we've ever come up with as a board.
That for sure is. Tina?
I guess I don't have a plan. Some of the charge parameters I do, but
Like
we've
what?
discussed them too many times. So I don't really, I guess
Right.
I'm kind of like,
Consensus,
I mean, I
adoption.
really, when Chris presented this, I saw what he was getting at. I guess I didn't think he was going this far either. I still am not sure I feel that we need to, unless we are absolutely 100% sure on something that we are changing, building, adding on to, I don't know if I feel we need to include stakeholders. Unless we are 100% sure we're adding an addition, taking something
Quick question
out,
though,
but-
we already have a variety of stakeholders on our capital projects committee.
Exactly, so that's what I'm saying. Why do we need any other ones? Unless we
Because they're
are.
asking for.
I think that's what
You
they're-
asked my opinion.
No, so that's what,
I'm
but
giving
then you
you
asked
my
me a
opinion.
question.
No, I said, I'm not sure why we have to add more. And so you're asking what my concern is about this, I'm saying, we already have a great group that I think is able to make these decisions, and until they come up with a plan that needs to be carried out, then I don't see a reason why stakeholders need to be involved. If they say, hey, we need to add a building, then
So to
we can go
clarify,
there.
it's the stakeholders, that's your,
Again, I feel like this is looking at, we're gonna be making some big changes. And really, the vision is that we're not gonna be making changes. We need to make a plan for the changes. But this, in my opinion, and I said this last time, still makes it seem like we are making changes.
That seems
But
like
it's
we're making
all-
a committee to me.
We're making a committee and a committee
See how
of
you
the
feel.
stuff that's not happening.
Well, I don't think it really specifies the stakeholders, so
No,
but I mean, I feel like that could be people within the district, we just,
it could be anybody.
I mean,
So
I
I
guess
guess
that,
that's-
but, I mean, but they're already there, so why, I mean, that committee's already formed. Again, we've talked about this, but it is what it is. I guess we'll
I
just see
guess
how it
because
goes
they've
out.
asked for it and it's really no out-of-pocket expense, basically, so
I'm
that's where I
curious.
lie, so I'm fine with it. if people
I mean,
are
I
willing
know
to-
what Chris's point was when he brought this up. I understand what
Yeah.
the capital improvements committee was. I guess I'm just, so
I
now
guess-
that now that we've come up with this master strategic plan, I'm curious to see what's the next step.
Yeah, I guess I look at it as capital projects does, you know,
Shorter term.
let's say 1 to 5 years. And so this other committee's gonna
It's not a
do
bad
5
thing.
to 15, 20 plus years. So
I just didn't
it's
think
just
it was
another
a-
committee for a long range
That's fine.
strategical plan, so.
okay, so it sounds like I have a lot of indifference and then some small interest.
Actually,
But no one's opposed?
well, here, can I throw in
Well,
because,
I think we were, but it still got to this point. I think there was a
Yeah.
lot of opposition, but we still fought, it still
Yeah.
kept going and
Did
going.
you say
So
opposed?
I don't think there was a lot
Is that
of,
what you
I
said?
mean, I
No,
think there was a
I was
lot.
trying to figure out how much opposition.
I wasn't
said
really for it in the first
Oh.
place.
I mean, none of us
I'm
were like,
against
yay,
it.
let's do
Yeah.
this, but we got to this point
Okay,
anyway,
that's
so
my
what does it
question.
matter?
I guess my bigger concern is, I hear what you're saying, but I have a huge concern when we have a group that comes to us and says, we'd like some direction.
Well, that's
We did
why-
give them
And
direction.
that's why I'm,
We said, go back to your group, you're in charge of capital improvements, and until you come up with a plan that needs to be done, we talked about this, Kathy, so this is nothing new.
Okay, but my understanding when we talked about it, and that's why I'm a little confused, my understanding was capital projects said we have
What your
this
thoughts were.
much of a window. And we would like some feedback on a longer window. Like that was kind of, am I understanding that was sort of the overarching?
I mean,
That's part of it. That's a
I was gonna say, can I-
component of it.
You know, when this was first proposed to us, it was a much broader thing. Please tell us how we're gonna deliver education 7, 8, 10 years from now. Let's talk about that. This is, I think what everybody's acknowledging is this is just recreating what we already have.
I mean, isn't
think
this the
is
capital
John's
improvement
objection, this is
team?
Tina's objection. We've narrowed the strategic charge to such a point that it's just about facilities. We're no longer talking about how we're gonna deliver education in 10 years.
Actually, that one's on the parking lot, you missed that, I'm sorry. That was part of our workshop last week.
Parking
was
lot?
When we moved
Yeah.
it to the parking
See?
lot to narrow this charge.
Excuse me, what the hell is a parking lot?
It's place that we're keeping a list of ongoing things that we want to talk about that are not going to be ignored, but that we realize maybe are too broad for this particular topic.
All right, nonetheless,
And
I
there's
think
one
you're
getting
getting
right
this, I
that's
think you're
your
getting
trouble.
this yawn from the board because no one's really interested in doing what this is.
And,
And I
okay,
think if you took a vote right now, it would be dead right now.
Well, I feel like we haven't heard
from
I guess
everybody.
it shouldn't be dead because we've worked so hard, but I guess I'm feeling
I
like
think it's perfectly fine. If we're-
none of us have.
If everybody here says, I have zero interest in giving this capital projects committee any outside direction, and we just want you to handle it,
Here, Chris,
How do you feel about
this is
that?
your time to speak.
I was gonna say, can I
Chris
actually
hasn't
jump in here for a
Need
minute?
to advocate for it.
Okay, so allow me to advocate. First of all, I think we spent a lot of time inefficiently because we did not fully understand how we were supposed to operate. So I think that since.
Who's we? Us or you?
as a board.
We as a board.
That's why we got
We,
trained up.
we as a board, we
trained
were
up.
unfocused before we had our last training, which helped put us more on task. So I think that we should be approaching this as though it were a completely new topic, because we are actually doing what we were supposed to be doing by creating a charge. So that is the first part of what I think we need to be a little bit more patient on past discussions, because I don't think that they were very efficient. The second part of that is, as somebody who is on the capital improvement committee and as somebody who has a lot of experience in architecture, because I'm a recovering architect, I know the value of having a long-term plan when it comes to facilities that are expected to last for decades. And right now, we are in a position where making no decision is making a decision, where we may end up as a capital improvement committee saying, all right, this roof is falling down, it needs to be replaced. We have no plans to do anything else with this school because we have not come up with a long-term plan. Therefore, we are going to throw $1 million at this roof, and then it's possible that 2 years down the road, we decide that we're going to mothball that school.
Okay, my question is to you and Tony is, why can't the capital improvement team that is in place right now make those decisions?
And I would say that they are not,
They're not decisions that one small committee, and it is a relatively small committee, are in a position to make for an entire school district.
Okay, so if this charge gets put into place today and we all vote yes, does this mean that this does not take action until a situation that Chris just brought up comes in place? When a roof needs to be replaced, but we're not sure if it needs to be replaced because we don't know what's gonna happen to that building? Or are you gonna go out and start this whole big new facilities commission, knowing right now that the board is not going to be doing any major projects?
But it could be
I-
mothballing a building.
I think it's possible that this long-term master facility committee may go through and just say, with their long-term plan, hey, Hooverwood and Grace McWayne, they're fine, they're relatively new, we can just do maintenance. Their long-term master facilities plan is done, and we don't have to worry about it. But then they might address something like a Storm or a Louise White and go, all right, we've got roofs that need to be replaced, we've got partitions that need to be addressed, all right, maybe we need to have stakeholders get together and discuss what is going to be the long-term plan for this specific school. And as a board, I think it's important that we give the charge that is more general, and they can determine where they need to focus it and say, hey, we're not going to spend a lot of resources on these facilities because we think they're fine for the next 15 years with just maintenance. Or they may decide, you know what, we need to go more in depth on this facility because, you know what, we've got some big expenditures that are coming up in the next 5 to 10 years, and we don't know what we're going to do with that school long term. So I think that this is an incredible amount of responsibility because it feasibly could lead to a new school being built, an addition being put on, a school being closed. We don't know where this is potentially going to go.
But we've made those decisions in the past as a district. We've had additions, we've done other planning, we've done other things without having to, until that plan has been made.
Right.
But I don't know that anyone would.
That's not really true, no.
Okay.
All these decisions in the past, since the mid-'80s, have been made through facilities commission.
Through facilities commission.
But who made
Well,
the
not always.
decision up until that point?
Facilities commissions make the decision, and subsequent facilities commissions have been working off of the visions of prior work. They always build and continue prior visioning. The additions to the high school were based off of visions that were made in the mid-1980s. They were always continuing each other's work. we have had a giant hiatus, and from by my estimates, this town will probably have lived through the longest duration of time between referendums it ever has, at
Right.
least since 1950. So it's the longest we've ever gone since the early 50s that we haven't constructed or built something as a school district. By the time we'll get to actually doing something again. And it's because primarily we haven't had a facilities commission active in many years.
And if my understanding is correct, we are at the point where when around 26, 27 is when we're actually going to have all of our debt paid off from all the past commissions and all the, that.
What we really need to do, in my opinion, is as a community, decide what we want our schools to look like and establish standards. And then compare our schools as they exist now to those standards. And then come up with a plan to get them to that difference. And that's going to incorporate district money, that's going to incorporate, probably incorporate referenda. It will probably incorporate PTOs and donations and all the different sources that money comes from. But we can't just ad hoc come up with plans and chuck them at the wall and hope that they actually do something productive. The current Capital Projects Committee is a small group of people. It does include stakeholders, but they don't necessarily have the viewpoints of the entire community of Batavia at the table. It's an operational community, or it's an operational committee. RAC, great committee. They're tactical. You're strategic. You're the only ones that can do this work, according to mine. Because this is truly about making sure that we have the facilities long-term designed in such a fashion that they're conducive to our students learning and our teachers teaching. It's your job.
Do you think these parameters address that?
My honest opinion
Yes.
is that they do not. I think we've watered this, we keep, this discussion keeps winding around and around to the point where my head spins. I don't even know what we're talking about
But
anymore,
it's because
frankly.
okay, and you're right, and you know why? Because it's never been done before. So exactly what you're saying, we
We
keep
haven't done
spinning
it
and
before.
spinning and spinning, but it's because it's not been done. So you have to give us that, all right? This is something new, so I understand, but.
It's new for
I don't
us.
understand how, I can show you all the books. It's not new.
What are the
Take
previous
you through
charges
history.
that we should be building off of? Is our previous charges that the previous facilities commissions left us with that is supposed to be guiding us going forward?
The only thing that was left were the athletic facilities at the high school. And we knew that there was going to be a major issue when we decided to put the addition on the high school in 2006, I think is when that.
That's when field house.
2007 was about when the field house was constructed. 2006 was about when that facilities commission.
Yeah, I love that, but.
So may I suggest something that may be more helpful, that may help?
The
us
referendum
forward?
was passed in 2006, right?
Right. So, yeah, the decision was made back in 2006 that if this all comes to fruition, we're gonna have to do something about the athletic field. So that's how they left it, yes.
The referendum was passed
We
in
thought you were talking about the
2006, but we
construction.
built the field house in 2007.
No. Field house wasn't built until like 2014, 13, 14, 15, in that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Didn't
was.
seem like that long.
My daughter was going through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it wasn't even open.
Yeah.
It wasn't even open.
That's all right. But the thing was, when the last commission did leave it as, you better do something about the athletics, right? Because
You're
we're
gonna need
leading
to do
into all of
something.
them. Annie?
So, all right, so we can argue about when things have happened, but the referendum happened in 2006 that authorized the
Lots
building.
of stages to it, yes.
Right.
They knew at that time that they had to make a decision about the impacts that it would have on the fields.
Who made that decision? The board?
Well, ultimately the board, but it was informed by the commission.
Okay, so
The commission said, we've studied this issue, this is what we think you should do.
So it was like the RAC back then? Is that what it, I mean?
No,
No, it was
RAC
No,
was
it's
the
the
facilities
facilities
commission.
You were on
Facilities
the, you're
No.
on the facilities
No,
commission?
no,
No.
two separate things.
So why was,
Capital.
okay, why was the last commission really brought up? I knew it was because the high school needed more classrooms. They were talking about the facilities for the PE and all that, and the music and the art area and so on. But what drove it to make that commission? Maybe that's the answer that we need.
There was a clear.
Because if you're telling me, from what I'm hearing from the other side down there, that we're worried about a new building, you know, that we're not gonna spend $3 million on a roof because it might be, we might have to have a new building in 5 or
So
10
here's-
years.
here's-
I'm just trying to figure out where we're going with this, because that's why I'm saying, this is not specific enough. What drove that, and I was part of that, but I don't know what drove it, that made it start.
If I may,
Okay,
there was a clear and present need to improve the facilities at the high school. At the
okay.
time, it was obvious. Now, there's a clear and present need to improve the schools that we have that are aging. We have 2 schools that are over 60 years old. We've got 2 other schools that were built in the late 1970s that need a lot of work. We also have declining enrollments and changes happening demographically in town. We need to take a wholehearted look at, a large view look at what's happening with our facilities. And we can't have a small committee making one-off decisions about that. We need a long-term plan.
So why won't this chart work? You said, I mean, so what needs to be
Can I throw something in
different?
first? Because it seems to me like you guys are looking for something that's a little bit more focused. For example, can we put in a long-term plan for HC Storm as a specific charge? You know, but the
It
reason
could
that
be.
I think that that is a bad idea is we have so many needs at so many buildings throughout the district that we can't make a decision on HC Storm without taking it into context of the entire district.
Exactly.
That-
So let's
which
say
is why I
that the
think
work
this
at
is important.
HC Storm is $4 million. Well, first of all, where are you gonna come up with $4 million? Except for a referendum. What community is gonna pass a $4 million referendum that only affects 1/6 of the district? We need to think about this in a larger package about what happens to all of our buildings. That's the clear and present need.
What would you change? What would you add to this charge to clarify?
To make it clear that this is not just a facilities master plan, that this needs to incorporate visioning in terms of like, what are our standards? What are the standards that this community expects and wants and is willing to pay
It's in
for?
there, develop standards.
So should these be multiple charges? Should we have one group
No,
going?
you don't need multiple charges, just one, I think will suffice.
But that one charge could lead to multiple results, well, obviously, or it could lead to
That
multiple.
does develop standards for schools.
But, you know, Sue, you said earlier, I don't care because it doesn't cost me anything. Well, the reality is this plan is going to cost you some money, because guess what we have to do? We have to work with architects, and architects aren't free. This is going to cost money, it's going to cost
And
time,
Tony,
and
what
it's
happens if we
strategic
don't
work.
do anything? Is it still free?
When we don't do anything, we don't make a decision, and that's making a decision.
And that's still spending money, isn't it? Whether we are.
Right now, the earliest that we can ever get any of this work done is 2021. That's the timeframes in which we're operating. So the longer we let this wait, you know, that's going to turn into
See, I think it's
2022.
important to do something.
Although some of the roofs are in the budget before that.
That's just one
All right,
example.
so
but
we have.
I don't want to
we have
belabor the one example, but this is the concept that
Right.
we need to be working
We have
with.
discussed this ad nauseam. I am going to entertain a motion to approve to adopt this strategic charge to develop a facilities master plan as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Lowe, second by Locke. Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Oh, wait, hold on. Beatty Bar,
Nope.
Blakely,
No,
Dryden,
Yes.
Gaspar,
No.
Locke,
Yes.
Lowe.
Yes.
It's 3-3. Dremel.
Yes. All right, that is all of the items on our action agenda tonight, so we'll move right into administration comments. Dr. Hitchens.
I just wanted to share, thank the teachers who've just been through a round of data days. I know at the elementary, definitely all of them, and then some of the middle school and high school teachers as well. And I think it's just such an important time, and we get good feedback from the teachers. If you're not aware, data days happen 3 times a year, so I'm just going to pick on elementary because that's the ones I've sat in the past. And they look at assessment data from their students, so they have this new group of students. We use MAP and other assessments, and the teachers look to see every year the group of students in front of you changes, so they get to know their students that way and how they need to change their core instruction to meet the needs of those kids and identify some students that might need extra assistance at that time. It's time consuming and it's a lot of work, and I think it's a great process and it really has benefited our students. So round one of day-to-day is done for the year. They do another one in the winter, another one in the spring. So that's all I wanted to highlight.
All right, we'll start with Sue tonight.
I have nothing.
Chris Long.
My life has been overwhelmed with sports lately, so I've been watching a lot of cross-country runners, especially the Rotolo cross-country runners, so I want to wish them congratulations on their first place conference victory, both boys and girls today, and wish them luck at sectionals on Saturday and state a week from Saturday. And I know that we have a lot of other sports going on, but that has been my hyper-focus lately. And go Bulldogs, happy homecoming week.
Thanks, Chris. Tina.
Just a safe homecoming this weekend. That's it.
Bob.
I just want to say thanks to everyone here. This is always super stimulating, really enjoyable. And also just have a great homecoming week. Super exciting. I have a junior at home, so she's been doing all the activities, and it's just really fun to live vicariously through her at this time of the year. The one thing that I wanted to say is when as a board member, I look at policy as something that gives me a tool set to make a decision or to have a conversation to make a decision as something comes to us as a Board of Education. And the policy that we approved tonight really left me feeling like I did not have any direction based on what that policy said. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble processing that.
The policy on 6080, the language of that policy in general I felt as a board member, it gave me no backbone of decision making to reference.
Got you, thank you. Yeah.
Well, I often find Tony a very persuasive fellow, so you just watch me flip my vote from one thing to the next.
That silver tongue devil.
Well, I think that I can be persuaded in the absence of any idea of my own. I would like to congratulate the men's football team on their truly heroic victory over Geneva last week. As we used to say in the classroom to the boys, bring back your shield of the audit. When it's Geneva, you only have to win one game of the year. So 49-0 was sweet. Happy homecoming week. Our thoughts, of course, go out to folks in Las Vegas, hoping someday we have the courage to fix what we need to fix. Cheers.
Thanks, John. John Jasper.
I just wanted to thank everyone for the lively discussions that we've had. Always brings out different opinions and sometimes can change your mind. RJAC was free from me this last week and a half, so you guys were off the hook, but thank you. Hall of Honor is Thursday night with the dedication of the newest members. So I don't know if you can still buy a ticket, but if you can, go online, purchase a ticket. It's worthwhile. And homecoming this week. Hopefully there will be a parade tomorrow. Weather doesn't look good, but we'll see. And just thanks everybody, and have a safe week. Thank you.
You can pay at the door at the Hall of Honor.
And you can pay at the door.
Tickets at the door. Tickets extra.
From the boss. From the boss.
All right, and I cannot add anything to the heartfelt eloquence of my fellow board members, so I will not even try. Instead, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Well, we had the closed session, but usually the over-under was
Oh, I
8:30.
apologize, right, yep.
So,
Are we going to keep it to the next
6
day
o'clock.
for 6 o'clock?
yeah, 6
Yeah.
o'clock next meeting.
So
So we're not going into closed
I'm in
session.
favor of that.
Session tonight.
I'm in favor for the 6 o'clock.
So moved.
All right,
Yes.
moved by Locke,
Second.
second by Baby Bar, all in
You've been
favor?
doing it.
Aye.
Put
We're
somebody else do some
adjourned.
work.
Somebody seconded.
Let somebody else do something.